The narrow cobblestone streets of the village were silent, too silent. Only the soft clatter of boots echoed through the misty dawn as Nazi soldiers patrolled, their rifles slung low but eyes sharp, scanning every shadow. Windows were shuttered, and doors bolted as if the houses themselves held their breath. In the distance, the faint hum of military trucks rolling along the road reminded the villagers that freedom was a fragile, fleeting thing. Emil crouched behind a stack of wooden crates, heart pounding. At 15, he should have been at home, eating breakfast with his mother, his small sister tugging at his sleeve. Instead, he gripped the handlebars of his battered bicycle, feeling the familiar worn leather beneath his fingers. This was no ordinary morning ride. Today, like every day, his town's survival depended on what he could carry across the streets without being seen. He peeked around the crates. The soldiers moved in a slow, deliberate formation, speaking in low German commands. Their eyes scanned the streets, missing the old bakery, the fountain, the children pretending to play under the watchful roofs. Immo had noticed long ago that the soldiers' patrols created tiny windows moments where a shadow could slip unnoticed, and he intended to use every one of them. The teenager's sharp eyes scanned the street corner, calculating. The resistance had entrusted him with the latest orders written in cryptic symbols only a few could decipher. If they fell into Nazi hands, the consequences were unthinkable. He slid the folded paper from his jacket and tucked it carefully inside a hollow tube in his bicycle frame. The trick had taken him weeks to perfect, but now with the soldiers so close, every second felt like an eternity. A boot clicked sharply against the stone, too close, too fast. Emil froze, gripping the bike as though it were a lifeline. One of the officers had turned suddenly, his gaze sweeping Emil's hiding spot. Sweat pricked Emil's forehead. His lungs clenched with the fear of being caught, of the mission and perhaps his life ending before it even began. The officer lingered for a heartbeat too long, nostrils flaring, scanning the shadows as if sensing some disturbance. Emil's stomach dropped. Then, almost imperceptibly, the officer moved on, distracted by a dropped helmet across the square. Emil exhaled slowly, silent tears of relief welling in his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he mounted his bicycle, adjusting the note for a final check. This close call was a reminder. Every ride, every delivery could be his last. But the orders had to get through. Someone had to keep hope alive in a town suffocating under the boots of occupation. He pushed off, the tires whispering against the cobblestones, and began weaving between shadows and abandoned carts. The mist swirled around his wheels like smoke, hiding him from prying eyes. And as he pedaled, Emil felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. In his hands, a small piece of paper carried more weight than any weapon, more power than the soldiers. Rifles. Somewhere beyond the village, the resistance waited. And Emil, with nothing but courage, cunning, and his old bicycle, was about to cross paths with destiny. Emil returned home as the sun began to pierce the gray morning mist, to cobblestones, damp beneath his tires. The village seemed unchanged at first glance, but the small details told a different story. Shutters nailed shut, doors reinforced, a faint smell of smoke from the ovens of rationed bread. Life under Nazi occupation was a fragile routine built on fear, whispers, and careful observation. His mother sat at the small wooden table, her hands trembling as she handed him a thin slice of bread. "Eat quickly," she whispered. The soldiers could come at any moment. Emil took the bread silently, the weight of responsibility pressing heavier with each bite. His father's face was drawn, etched with worry lines that seemed to deepen with every passing day. He was a quiet man by nature, but these were quiet times where even whispers could be deadly. Outside, villagers moved like ghosts, heads down, eyes averted from passing patrols. Children, who should have been laughing and chasing one another, clung to mother's skirts, pretending to play in circles while constantly scanning the streets for boots and rifles. Everyone had learned to live in a delicate balance between normalcy and survival, and Emil, just a teenager, felt that burden. More keenly than most, he left the house, bicycle in hand, weaving down narrow lanes to the abandoned mill at the edge of town. This was where the resistance met in secret, a network of ordinary men and women risking everything to send vital information past the German lines. Emil's stomach tightened at the thought of the orders hidden in his bike frame, tiny strips of paper that could change the course of a mission, save lives, or condemn them all if discovered. The meeting was brief, the words hurried and low. "The Allies need every advantage we can give," whispered Marek, the resistance leader, a man older than Emil but no less courageous. "These messages, they must get through. You're the fastest we have. But remember, the Nazis are watching. They've grown suspicious of the smallest things." Emil nodded, feeling the weight of their trust. The burden of being a teenager entrusted with secrets bigger than himself. Riding back through the village, every shadow seemed to hide a soldier. He passed the bakery where a German officer had stopped last week, questioning the baker about unusual activity. A cold shiver ran down Emil's spine. News traveled fast, and suspicion could spread faster. Even a friendly smile, a simple wave to a neighbor, could be interpreted as a signal, a warning. He had learned to nod silently, to keep his eyes on the ground, to make every movement seem ordinary. At home, Emil watched his younger sister playing with a ragged doll, her laughter soft and uncertain. She didn't understand the danger, the stakes, the invisible war that wove itself around every daily action. Emil felt a pang of guilt and fear. He wanted to help, to be brave, but he also wanted to protect her and his parents from the cruelty that lurked just outside their doors. It was a conflict that twisted inside him, courage against caution, hope against fear. That evening, Emil witnessed a small incident that sharpened the tension. A soldier stopped at the fountain, his eyes narrowing as he watched a group of villagers collect water. He demanded papers from a man, rifling through the pockets and scrutinizing every detail. A simple slip, a hesitated glance, and a life could be destroyed. Emil's stomach churned. He knew the Nazi gaze could be relentless, and even small acts of resistance came with enormous risk. Yet, in the midst of fear, the tiny acts of rebellion, the silent cooperation, gave the villagers hope. Emil's bicycle runs were not just messages, they were lifelines, threads connecting the oppressed to the resistance, to the chance of liberation. Each pedal stroke, each hidden note, was a defiance of tyranny, a refusal to surrender. He had never felt so small, yet so vital. As night fell, Emil lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The village slept under the watchful eyes of their occupiers, unaware of the courage stirring in their midst. His mind replayed the day, the wary glances, the hurried exchanges at the mill, the lingering suspicion in the streets. He understood now that bravery was not just about fearlessness, it was about persistence, about risking oneself for the greater good. And he was beginning to see that even a teenager could tip the scales in ways that no one expected. A sudden knock at the door jolted him upright. His mother opened it cautiously. No one was there. Just a folded note, left carefully on the doorstep. Emil recognized the familiar symbol. The resistance had sent instructions for his next run. His pulse quickened. Every moment of rest was a moment of preparation. The dangers outside had not disappeared. They were simply waiting, hidden in shadows, ready to pounce. Emil clutched the note, feeling the rough paper against his palm. Tomorrow, he would ride again, weaving through streets lined with soldiers, dodging suspicion and danger. Every turn of his pedals was a gamble, every shadow a potential trap. But Emil also knew that his courage, ingenuity, and careful planning could make all the difference. In the village, life continued under the Nazi watch, ordinary and fearful. But Emil's small acts, the careful hiding of notes, the silent cooperation with the resistance, the audacity of a teenager on a bicycle were quietly reshaping the balance. And somewhere deep inside, he felt the first sparks of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, even in this world of fear, courage could endure. The morning fog clung to the village like a thick blanket, muffling sounds and hiding secrets. Emil wheeled his bicycle into the empty square, the tires whispering over cobblestones. Today wasn't just another ride. Today, he would test the trick that could change everything. The idea had come to him in a sudden flash, the hollowed frame of his bicycle. If he could hide the messages inside it, The Germans would never suspect the teenager's bike of carrying anything more dangerous than the wind. But hiding the orders was only the beginning. He had to move, dodge, and appear ordinary while doing something extraordinary. And ordinary was what the Nazis expected. Any misstep could cost him everything. Emil adjusted the small metal tube he had installed along the frame and slid in a piece of paper marked with the coded orders. The cylinder clicked into place. The secret was now invisible, yet vital, tucked away in plain sight. His heart raced, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Every successful run meant the difference between the resistance gaining a foothold or the mission collapsing under German scrutiny. At the abandoned mill, Marek and two other members of the resistance waited, shadows against the dim interior. "Emil," Marek said, his voice low but firm, "these orders are for the fighters across the river. Without them, the operation will fail. You're our fastest and most careful rider. But the patrols are increasing. You'll need to use everything you've practiced." Emil nodded, swallowing hard. His hands itched for action. "I can do it," he said, more to convince himself than anyone else. Marek's eyes were grave. "Speed alone won't be enough. You need to blend in, act normal, be invisible. The Germans have started watching the usual routes. Take detours. Use the shadows, and remember any hesitation can be fatal." With the plan clear, Emil rode into the streets, weaving between empty crates and narrow alleyways. At first, it was just practice. He leaped over loose cobblestones, skidded around corners, and used sudden drops in the terrain to hide under bridges. Each stunt was a rehearsal, a test of timing and nerves. But every jump, every swerve carried risk. A neighbor's window could reveal him, a stray soldier could glance the wrong way. Each time he emerged unscathed, the thrill was sharper than the last. He came close to disaster several times. The patrol unexpectedly changed route, the boots clattering too near. Emil froze mid-pedal, pressing himself flat against a wall as the soldiers passed, their rifles glinting in the weak morning light. He could hear their orders whispered harshly, their suspicion palpable. Sweat dripped down his forehead. Every run was a careful balance between daring and survival, between courage and calculation. By the time he returned to the mill, Emil's legs ached and his heart pounded, but he was grinning. Marek watched him silently, nodding once. "Good. You're ready. Tomorrow it won't be practice. The orders must reach them, no mistakes." Emil's mind spun with possibilities. The thought of crossing the village streets under the watchful eyes of German patrols made his stomach tighten, but it also sparked determination. He imagined the chase-daring maneuvers, narrow escapes, the rush of adrenaline as he slipped past soldiers who could destroy him with a single mistake. And somewhere in that tension, he found a strange sense of freedom. That night, he went over the plan again, laying out maps of the village and marking patrol routes, escape routes, and hidden corners. The river, the mills, the abandoned warehouse, all became points of strategy in a high-stakes game he had never signed up for but could not ignore. Emil understood that ingenuity and quick thinking were as vital as speed. One wrong turn, one glance too long, and the orders and perhaps his life would be lost. As he adjusted his bicycle one last time, sliding the orders into the hollow frame, Emil felt a surge of resolve. Tomorrow he would ride through the heart of the occupied village, threading through shadows and patrols. He would carry hope hidden in metal and paper, trusting his instincts and every carefully practiced trick. A sudden noise outside the mill made him freeze. A distant clatter of boots, a shadow moving past the window. Emil's chest tightened. The patrols were unpredictable, relentless. His pulse quickened as he imagined the chase that was coming. This was no longer practice. Tomorrow he would be tested for real. The village was a maze, the Nazis were watchful predators, and he was the small, swift spark weaving between them and Emil. With a careful grip on the handlebars and a clever trick hidden in his bicycle frame, felt the first real taste of what it meant to be a messenger in war danger, responsibility and the strange exhilaration of defying an empire with nothing. But courage and cunning. Night had fallen over the village like a heavy, suffocating shroud. The fog lay thick along the cobblestones, muffling footsteps and hiding every shadow. Emil adjusted the strap of his worn satchel, the hollowed bicycle frame humming softly beneath him as he slid the secret orders into place. Tonight was no practice. Tonight, he would ride through occupied streets carrying the lifeblood of the resistance. He pushed off from the edge of the village, tires whispering against the wet stones. Every street corner, every flickering lantern held a hidden danger. He felt his heart hammering in rhythm with the wheels. The patrols had shifted their routes since yesterday, and even one misstep could be fatal. At first, the ride was deceptively quiet. Emil leaned low over the handlebars, gliding past shuttered windows, past barrels of stacked wood, past the square where the fountain stood cold and still. The only sound was the soft crunch of stone beneath rubber and the distant murmur of the river beyond the village. Then a bark cut through the night. A dog, prowling the edges of a patrol, snarled and charged, teeth glinting. Emil jerked the handlebars to the side, leaping onto a narrow ledge along a wall. The dog's claws scraped the stones, but it missed him by inches. He didn't dare. Glance back, every second counted. A flashlight beam swept across the street ahead. A soldier emerged from the shadows, his rifle held tight, eyes sharp. Emil froze, crouched low, heart in his throat. The soldier's gaze lingered too long, following the path Emil intended to take. Time seemed to slow as Emil weighed his options. Then, with a sudden, fluid motion, he swerved down a narrow alley, pedals churning furiously, and disappeared into a shadowed doorway. His chest burned, lungs screaming, but he couldn't stop. The message inside his bicycle frame was too important. Somewhere beyond the village, the resistance waited for the orders that could tip the balance, that could save lives. He couldn't fail. A second patrol appeared, their boots clattering. On the cobblestones like drums of doom, Emil's mind raced. He remembered his training, use the shadows, improvise, blend in. With a sudden leap, he bounced his bike over a low wall, wheels barely clearing the edge, landing silently behind a pile of crates. The soldiers passed, oblivious, voices murmuring commands. Emil exhaled slowly, trying not to betray his presence. The village square was next a wide, open space, usually deadly under the watchful eyes of the Nazis. Emil approached cautiously, timing each pedal stroke with the sweep of their torches. He ducked behind a fountain, rolled across a fallen cart, and finally pushed into the narrow street leading to the safe house, his stomach clenched with every heartbeat. One wrong move could mean capture or worse. Finally, the mill came into view, dim lights flickering inside. Merrick and another resistance member were there, waiting, shadows tense and silent. Emil skidded to a stop, sliding the bike against the wall. Hands trembling, he extracted the orders from the hollow frame and handed them over. Marek's eyes widened as he saw the papers intact. "You made it," he breathed, relief washing over his face. Emil sank to his knees, chest heaving. The adrenaline coursing through him left his hands trembling, sweat slick on his brow. He had done it. He had evaded patrols, dogs, and chance. Itself to deliver the orders that could change everything, but the relief was brief. Marek leaned closer, his voice low and serious. "The patrols are adapting," he said. "They're noticing patterns. Someone or something is slipping through every night. We need to be smarter, faster. They'll be ready next time." Emil felt a chill run down his spine. His triumph, exhilarating as it was, had already tipped the scales of suspicion. The Nazis were watching, learning, anticipating. Each ride would now carry even more danger, each shadow more threat. But he also felt a strange surge of pride. He had risked everything and survived. He had proven, to himself at least, that courage and ingenuity could bend even the strictest lines of control. As he mounted his bike to leave, Marek clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Rest now, tomorrow you ride again. And remember every trick. Every turn, every second matters." Emil nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He glanced once more at the streets he had just navigated, lit only by moonlight and fog, imagining the patrols sharpening their senses, waiting for the next attempt, and Emil, chest still racing, tires whispering softly beneath him, pedaled into the mist once more. Each motion was precise, each shadow a shield, each heartbeat a reminder. The mission was far from over. The night was alive with danger, and the chase, the true test of his skill, courage, and wits had only just begun. The village had changed. Emo could feel it in the air, the nervous tension, the quiet glances between neighbors, the way the streets seemed to hold their breath. Rumors had spread that a new officer, one who prided himself on rooting out spies and saboteurs, had been assigned to patrol their sector. His presence was like a shadow over every doorstep, a constant reminder that the Nazis were tightening their grip. Emo pedaled cautiously through the misty streets, his eyes scanning for anything unusual. Every movement felt heavier now, each corner a potential trap. The patrols were larger, more coordinated, their dogs sharper and hungrier. The thrill of the first run had given way to something sharper. Colder fear tempered by necessity. He turned down an alley and froze. There, half hidden by the shadows, was Jonas, his friend from the mill, being confronted by two soldiers. Jonas's hands were raised, panic etched across his face. Emo's heart hammered. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him: ride past and survive, or risk everything to help a friend. Jonas's eyes met Emo's for a fleeting second, a silent plea burning in them. Emo gritted his teeth, the tension knotting in his stomach. He wouldn't abandon him. Taking a deep breath, he shifted into motion, using the bike to shield himself as he pedaled closer. Weaving between crates and barrels to stay out of sight, the soldiers barked orders at Jonas, who stumbled backward. Emo reached the alley's edge, a sharp wall of stone separating him from detection. With a burst of speed, he launched the bike over a narrow gap, landing on the other side with a muted thud. Jonas's eyes widened in surprise, but Emo's focus was razor-sharp. The soldier's attention shifted just as he executed a daring pivot, sliding behind a stack of firewood. He could hear their boots clattering closer, their voices sharp, demanding. Time slowed. Every muscle in Emo's body was taut, every thought focused on the delicate balance between survival and action. The message in his bike frame felt heavier than ever, the knowledge that one misstep could mean capture, torture, or worse. And yet, the urgency to save Jonas burned brighter than the fear gnawing at his mind. He saw an opening, a narrow path between two buildings, barely wide enough for the bike. Emo pushed off with all his strength, tires skimming the stones, heart hammering. The soldiers hesitated, caught off guard by the audacity of his movement. Jonas followed, scrambling to keep pace, their combined motion a blur of desperation and precision. The new officer had arrived. His silhouette loomed at the far end of the alley, sharp boots echoing ominously, flashlight cutting through the fog. Emo's chest tightened. The man's eyes scanned the shadows, sweeping past Jonas but settling on Emo for a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity. Emo knew he had seconds to act. He leaned low, using the bike's momentum to swing around a corner, scraping past a wall so close it tore at his sleeve. The officer barked an order, but Emo had already vanished, Jonas in tow, swallowed by the labyrinth of alleys. The pounding of their hearts seemed louder than the patrols, a drumbeat of fear and courage intertwined. Finally, they emerged near the riverbank, the fog thick and forgiving. Emo stopped, gasping, hands shaking, watching as Jonas leaned against a tree, pale but alive. You saved me," Jonas whispered, voice trembling. Emo nodded, chest heaving. "We can't let them stop us." "Not now, not ever," but the relief was fleeting. Emo's mind replayed the near capture, the officer's sharp gaze, the clatter of boots chasing them through the shadows. He knew. The Nazis were learning, adapting. Every clever trick, every hidden route increased their suspicion. The next time, they might be waiting, ready to catch them. He also understood something deeper. Courage alone wasn't enough. He needed strategy, planning, and every ounce of ingenuity he could muster. Each ride carried not just the weight of the orders, but the lives of his friends, the hopes of the resistance, and the fragile chance of freedom. The stakes had never been higher. As they crouched in the mist, Emo glanced at the bicycle, the secret hollow frame holding the precious orders like a heartbeat trapped in metal. Tomorrow's ride would be even riskier. The village was no longer just occupied, it was a maze of suspicion, danger, and eyes that never slept. And Emil, small and determined, was caught in the center of it, a spark of defiance in the shadow. Of tyranny. With a deep breath, Emil whispered to Jonas, "We survive. We deliver no matter what." Jonas nodded, determination sparking in his eyes, and for a moment the fear receded, replaced by a fierce resolve. But Emil knew the danger was far from over. The new officer, the sharpened patrols, the ever-watchful dogs, they were reminders that the ultimate test was coming, and when it arrived, there would be no second chances. And as Emil adjusted the bike and peered back at the village streets, he felt the unmistakable thrill of the chase mingled with the icy grip of fear. Tomorrow he would ride again, weaving between shadows and enemies, threading the fragile line between life and death. The stakes had never been clearer. The night was darker than Emil had ever seen, the fog thicker, swallowing the edges of streets and alleys like a living thing. The village had fallen silent, but silence did not mean safety. Every shadow could conceal a soldier, every distant bark could signal pursuit. Emil gripped the handlebars of his bicycle tighter than ever. Tonight there was no margin for error. This delivery had to succeed. He had studied the patrol routes for days, memorized the gaps between guards, and planned a sequence of tricks that would push him to the edge of his skill. This was no ordinary run. He would need to leap walls, duck beneath beams, and spin through narrow alleyways, all while carrying the orders that could turn the tide of a resistance operation across the river. The first stretch of the route was deceptively calm. Emil leaned low, tires whispering across damp cobblestones, eyes scanning for any hint of movement. Then, without warning, a patrol emerged from a side street, boots pounding, rifles glinting in the moonlight. Emil felt a jolt of adrenaline and pushed his bike hard, skidding behind a stack of barrels. The officer's flashlights swept past him, missing by inches. He exhaled slowly and darted forward, pedaling furiously, weaving between crates and broken carts. The second obstacle came quickly, a narrow alley lined with jagged stones and low walls. Emil crouched low and launched himself over a gap between buildings, landing just beyond the patrol's line of sight. His bicycle trembled under him, but he maintained control, sliding smoothly into the next alley. A dog barked, teeth flashing, but Emil used a wall to shield himself, letting the animal pass without noticing him. He came to a square where 3 patrols converged unexpectedly, their torches crisscrossing like the beams of searchlights. Emil's heart pounded. He ducked behind the fountain, spun the bike sharply, and maneuvered through a narrow lane between 2 buildings, a path so tight only a child on a bicycle could navigate it. His hands burned from gripping the handlebars, his lungs screamed for air, but he couldn't stop. One mistake, and the orders and everything the resistance depended on would be lost. Finally, he reached the riverbank. The final checkpoint of his run loomed, a bridge patrolled by 2 officers with rifles ready. Emil slowed briefly, calculating his move. Timing was everything. He propelled the bike forward, leaping over a low railing and spinning into the shadows beneath the bridge. The officers shouted, rifles raised, but the motion of the leap and the fog concealed him. Emil pressed forward, tires skimming the river stones. Heart hammering, the safe house came into view, its dim lights flickering like distant stars. Emil skidded to a stop, gasping, chest heaving, and handed the hollowed frame to Marek. The orders were intact, unscathed, and ready to be deciphered by the resistance fighters. Marek's eyes widened, a mixture of relief and awe on his face. "You did it," he whispered. "These orders, they'll save lives. You've done more than anyone could have imagined." Emil sank to his knees, feeling the rush of fear and exhilaration washing over him. He had navigated the patrols, outsmarted the officers, and kept the mission alive. The weight of responsibility that had pressed on him for weeks now lifted slightly, replaced by a quiet, fierce pride. His courage, quick thinking, and ingenuity had made a tangible difference, yet Emil knew this was only one victory in a larger war. The patrols would adapt, the officers would become more vigilant, but for tonight, hope had won a small, critical battle. He had learned something profound, even in the darkest hours. One clever mind, one brave heart could outmaneuver an empire's. Watchful eyes dot as he rested, watching the fog curl over the river. Emil allowed himself a small smile. The orders he carried would enable the resistance to act, to strike, and to survive. His daring ride had changed the course of events, proving that courage and cunning could tip the scales, even against overwhelming odds. And in that quiet moment, as the night held its breath around the village, Emil realized the truth he had felt all along. Bravery wasn't the absence of fear, it was action in spite of it. He had pedaled through danger, risked everything, and emerged victorious. A spark of defiance lighting the shadows of occupation. The village was restless. The fog still lingered over the cobblestones, but now it carried something new, whispers of hope. The Nazis intensified their searches, their patrols moving with sharper precision, but Emil's clever tricks, honed over weeks of practice, had made him almost untouchable. Every shadow, every narrow alley, every hidden corner had become his ally. The village had begun to notice a small figure on a bicycle, darting through danger with uncanny skill, delivering messages that could tip the balance. Emil rode cautiously through the streets, eyes bright with the knowledge of his success. He no longer felt just the weight of fear pressing on his chest. He felt something heavier, stronger, pride. Not pride born of arrogance, but of courage, ingenuity, and moral fortitude. Each leap, each swerve, each carefully hidden message had been a small act of defiance against the oppressors, and it mattered. Each act had kept the flame of hope alive. At the safe house, the resistance gathered quietly, faces lit with gratitude and relief. Marek clapped Emil on the shoulder, eyes glistening with emotion. "You've done more than deliver messages," he said softly. "You've shown the village that even in darkness, courage can move mountains. Lives will be saved because of what you've done." Emil's heart swelled. He had risked everything, but the reward was more than just survival. It was the knowledge that his actions had real impact. Word of Emil's daring ride spread through the village like a quiet fire. Children whispered about the boy on the bicycle who could slip past the enemy. Adults nodded in silent admiration, their fear tempered by hope. Even in such dire times, one small, clever act an ordinary teenager pedaling through shadows could spark courage in others. As Emil leaned against his bicycle, watching the sun slowly pierce through the morning mist, he reflected on everything he had learned. Bravery was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. Ingenuity was not just cleverness, it was the tool that allowed survival in impossible circumstances. And hope was contagious, ignited by even the smallest victories. The orders had reached the resistance. Lives would be saved. And a legend had quietly been born in that small, occupied village. A boy with a bicycle, daring and clever, who had outwitted an empire and reminded everyone that even in the darkest times, courage could change everything.